Kim Dae-ho stood outside the massive glass building that housed the Universal Academy of Sciences Testing Center. The structure reached high into the purple sky of Nexus Prime, the galaxy's most important educational planet. Hundreds of alien species walked past him, their strange forms and colors making him feel very small and very human. He checked his watch again. Only 10 minutes until the most important test of his life would begin. For 23 years, he had prepared for this moment, every night studying in his tiny apartment on a new Sol colony, every morning practicing math problems until his fingers cramped, every weekend reading about galactic science while his friends went to parties. Dae-ho was not just any human taking this test. He was the first human ever to attempt entry into the Universal Academy. Earth's government had spent years negotiating just to get him this chance. The pressure on his shoulders felt heavier than the artificial gravity on this alien world. "You can do this," he whispered to himself in Korean. "It's all those years of being the smartest kid in class, all those perfect scores. This is just another test." But deep down, he knew this was different. The Universal Academy had educated the galaxy's greatest minds for over 10,000 years. Their graduates became leaders, inventors, and philosophers who shaped the future of countless worlds. No human had ever walked these halls as a student. The testing center doors opened with a soft whoosh. Dae-ho walked inside, his heart beating fast. The waiting room was filled with beings he had only seen in textbooks. Tall blue creatures with 4 arms. Small furry aliens with large black eyes. Reptilian beings covered in shimmering scales. They all looked confident. They all belonged. Here he found the registration desk where a robot scanned his identification card. The machine beeped and printed a small badge with his photo and the number 4,847. Almost 5,000 beings were taking the test today. The competition would be fierce. "Testing begins in 5 minutes," announced a voice in perfect Galactic. "Standard language. Please proceed to your assigned chamber." Dae-ho followed the signs to chamber 15. The room was completely white and empty except for a single chair and a strange device that looked like a metal headband connected to a computer. 20 other test takers sat in identical chairs around the circular room. None of them looked at him, but he could feel their curiosity about the strange human among them. A tall, thin alien with gray skin and large purple eyes entered the room. This was clearly the test supervisor. The being moved with the kind of quiet authority that came from years of watching nervous students take the most difficult exam in the galaxy. "Welcome to the Universal Academy entrance examination," the supervisor said. "I am Examiner Kelth. You will have exactly 4 hours to complete the cognitive resonance assessment. The device before you will measure your ability to think in harmony with established galactic knowledge patterns." Dae-ho frowned. That did not sound like any test he had ever heard of. On Earth, tests measured what you knew or how well you could solve problems. This sounded different, more strange. "Place the neural interface headband around your forehead," Examiner Kelth continued. "The device will present scenarios directly to your mind. Your brain's response patterns will be recorded and analyzed. Remember, there is no right or wrong answer, only proper thought alignment or failure to achieve cognitive resonance." The other test takers placed their headbands without hesitation. They had grown up in this system. They knew what to expect. Dae-ho hesitated for a moment, then fitted the cold metal device around his head. Immediately, images flooded his mind. Mathematical equations that seemed to solve themselves. Scientific theories that felt more like religious beliefs. Historical events where every detail had been decided by committee long ago. The test wanted him to accept these ideas without question, to let his mind fall into the same patterns that billions of galactic citizens had followed for centuries. Dae-ho's human brain rebelled. When shown a physics problem, he automatically looked for new ways to approach it. When presented with a philosophical question, he considered alternatives that had never been tried. When given historical facts, he wondered about the stories that had not been told. Every instinct he had developed through 23 years of human education screamed at him to think differently, to question everything, to find better solutions. His mind raced with possibilities and ideas that the test system had never encountered before. Hours passed like minutes. The images in his head became more complex and demanding. The system pushed harder for conformity. Tadeo's resistance grew stronger. By the end, he felt like he had been fighting a war inside his own thoughts. The headband powered down with a soft click. Round the room, other test takers looked tired but satisfied. They had given the system what it wanted. They had thought the approved thoughts and reached the acceptable conclusions. Daeho felt different, exhausted and confused, but somehow more himself than ever before. Results will be available in 72 hours, Examiner Kelth announced. You may leave. The walk back to his small hotel felt like a dream. Daeho could not shake the feeling that something had gone very wrong during the test. The questions had seemed designed to reward people who never questioned anything, who accepted whatever they were told, who thought the same thoughts as everyone else. That was not how humans learned. That was not how he had been taught to approach problems. His mind naturally looked for flaws in theories, gaps in logic, and better ways to do things. Had this made him fail the test before it even began? 3 days later, the results arrived in his hotel room via electronic message. Daeho opened it. With trembling fingers, a test score 0.003 out of 100.00. Status: rejected. Cognitive resonance level: unmeasurable. Recommendation: candidate displays thought patterns incompatible with advanced galactic education. Further testing not recommended. 0.003 out of 100. Daeho read the message. 5 times before the reality sank in, he had not just failed, he had achieved what the system considered an impossible score, so low that it suggested his brain did not work properly. He sat on his bed and stared out the window at the alien city. Below, somewhere in those towers, the galaxy's future leaders were being trained to think exactly like everyone else, to never question, to never innovate, to never imagine that things could be different. For the first time since receiving his rejection, Kim Do-ho smiled. Maybe failing this test was not the end of his dream. Maybe it was the beginning of something much more important. 2 weeks after returning to New Soul Colony, Kim Do-ho still could not sleep properly. Every night he stared at the ceiling of his small apartment, thinking about that impossible test score, 0.003. The number haunted him, like a bad dream that would not end. His friend Park Min-soo visited every few days, bringing food and trying to cheer him up. Maybe you should apply to the Centauri Technical Institute instead, Min-soo suggested during one visit. Plenty of humans. Do well there. You could have a good career. But Daeho shook his head. I need to understand what happened. How can a thinking person score almost 0 on any test? It makes no sense. Sometimes things just do not work out, Min-soo said gently. The Academy has been around for 10,000 years. Maybe humans just think differently. That phrase stuck in Daeho's mind long after his friend left. Maybe humans just think differently. What if that was not a weakness? What if it was something else entirely? The next morning, Daeho walked to the colony's small library. He requested every public document the Universal Academy had ever released about their teaching methods. The librarian, an elderly woman named Lee Sui, looked surprised. That is a lot of reading, she warned. Are you sure you want all of this? Everything, Daeho said firmly. I want to understand how they teach students to think. For the next month, Daeho read constantly. Educational theory documents, student handbooks, teaching guidelines, graduation requirements. The more he read, the more disturbed he became. The Academy did not teach students to solve new problems. Instead, they taught students to recognize which old solutions to apply to familiar problems. Every question had an approved answer that had been decided centuries ago. Every theory had been locked in place so long that no one remembered why it was chosen originally. The cognitive resonance test measured how well a student could suppress their own thoughts and think exactly like the system expected. Original ideas were marked as errors. Creative solutions were signs of mental illness. Innovation was treated as a dangerous disease that needed to be cured. Daeho found records of Academy graduates throughout history. Their great achievements were impressive at first glance. Faster spaceships, better medical treatments, more efficient energy systems. But when he looked closer, he realized something shocking. Every breakthrough was just a small improvement on something that already existed. No one had invented anything truly new in thousands of years. The galaxy's greatest minds were being trained to be extremely good at making tiny changes to old ideas. They had forgotten how to imagine completely different approaches to problems. They had educated creativity out of their entire civilization. "This is insane," Deho muttered to himself as he read through another stack of documents. He was sitting in the library late at night, surrounded by printed papers and empty coffee cups. "They are teaching billions of intelligent beings to stop thinking. What are you working on so late?" asked a voice behind him. Deho turned to see Dr. Kong Soman, former university professor who had moved to New Seoul after retiring from Earth's education system. She was in her 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes that missed nothing. "Hey, Dr. Kong," Deho said, scrambling to organize his papers. "I am researching the Universal Academy's teaching methods after your test results," she asked, sitting down. Across from him, Minsu told me what happened. "I am sorry." "Do not be sorry," Deho said. "I think I failed for the right reasons." He explained everything he had discovered, how the Academy valued conformity over creativity, how they taught students to suppress original thinking, how the entire galactic civilization had been stagnating for millennia because no one was allowed to question established ideas. Dr. Kang listened carefully, occasionally asking questions or requesting to see specific documents. When Deho finished his explanation, she sat quietly for several minutes. "You know," she said finally, "I spent 40 years teaching human students. The best ones were always the troublemakers. The ones who asked awkward questions and refused to accept simple answers. We called it critical thinking. The Academy calls it cognitive failure," Deho said bitterly. "Of course they do. Your human brain did exactly what it was supposed to do. It questioned everything. It looked for better solutions. It refused to blindly accept authority." Dr. Kong smiled. "No wonder you scored so low on their test. You were thinking like a human instead of thinking like their machine." Over the following weeks, word of Deho's research spread through the human colony. Other academics became interested. Dr. Yoon Tae-yoon, who studied alien psychology, offered to help analyze the test results. Professor Nam Guan, a specialist in comparative linguistics, wanted to examine how different species processed information. They met regularly in Dr. Kong's living room, turning it into an unofficial research center. Charts and graphs covered every wall. Books about education and cognitive development filled every available space. The group grew as more people heard about their work. "Look at this pattern," Dr. Yoon said during one meeting, pointing to a graph on his tablet. "Every species that joins the Academy shows the same change over time. Their innovation rate drops to almost zero within 2 generations. It is not just education," Professor Nam added. "Their languages change too. Words for creativity and imagination slowly disappear. New concepts stop being created." They are not just teaching conformity, Dr. Kong realized. They are breeding it, making it part of how entire species think and communicate. Deho stared at the evidence they had gathered. The Universal Academy was not just a school. It was a machine that turned creative, thinking beings into biological computers. It preserved stability by destroying the ability to imagine change. "What do we do with this information?" he asked. "We prove that there is a better way," Dr. Kang said firmly. "We show the galaxy what education could look like if it celebrated human thinking instead of suppressing it. How? We build our own system. Right here. We teach human children and any alien families willing to try something different. We prove that learning should encourage questions, not punish them." Deho felt something he had not experienced since receiving his test results. Hope. Not just for himself, but for every being in the galaxy who had been told their natural curiosity was wrong. "The Academy rejected me because I think like a human," he said slowly. "Maybe it is time to show them why that is actually a strength." Dr. Kong nodded. "Maybe it is time to teach the teachers." That night, Daeho did not stare at the ceiling. Instead, he dreamed of classrooms where students were encouraged to disagree with their teachers, where wrong answers led to interesting discussions instead of punishment, where the phrase "I do not know, let us find out together" was heard more often than memorize this approved fact. He dreamed of an education system that made thinking beings instead of thinking machines, and for the first time since his rejection, Kim Daeho began to plan for success. 6 months after his rejection from the Universal Academy, Kim Daeho stood in front of his first classroom. 20 human children sat at desks arranged in a circle instead of rows. Their ages ranged from 8 to 16, all eager volunteers, for what the colony had started calling the experiment. "Good morning," Daeho said, his voice slightly nervous. "I want to start with a question. Who can tell me why the sky is blue?" Several hands shot up immediately. This was exactly the kind of question Academy students would answer with a memorized response about light wavelengths and atmospheric particles. "Yes, Choi Minho?" Daeho pointed to a 12-year-old boy in the front. "Because of the way sunlight bounces off tiny pieces in the air," Minho answered confidently. "Good. That is the standard answer. Now I want everyone to think of 3 other possible explanations. They can be completely wrong. I just want you to imagine different reasons." The children looked confused. In their previous education, wrong answers meant punishment, and getting things incorrect was shameful. But Daeho waited patiently, smiling encouragingly. Slowly, hands began to rise. "Maybe the sky reflects the ocean," suggested a girl named Choi Yuna, Minho's younger sister. "Maybe blue light is stronger than other colors," offered another student. "If our eyes just see everything as more blue than it really is." Daeho wrote every answer on the board, treating each suggestion with equal respect. Excellent ideas. How could we test these theories? For the next hour, the children designed experiments. They discussed ways to measure light, observe the sky on different planets, and understand how human eyes worked. Most importantly, they learned that asking questions was more valuable than knowing answers. Dr. Kong Soman watched from the back of the room, taking notes. After class, she approached Daeho with excitement in her eyes. "Did you see how they responded?" she asked. Within minutes, they went from scared of being wrong to excited about exploring ideas. "It felt natural," Daeho agreed. "Like this is how children are supposed to learn." Their experimental school had started small. It's Dr. Kong, Daeho, and a few volunteer families willing to try something different. They called it the Inquiry Learning Center, and its methods were completely opposite to everything the galaxy considered normal education. Instead of teaching students what to think, they taught them how to think. Instead of memorizing facts, students learned to question everything instead of finding the right answer. They practiced finding better questions. Teacher Ohayari joined them after hearing about their results. She had spent years frustrated with traditional methods that made learning boring and mechanical. "I became a teacher to inspire children," she told Daeho, "not to turn them into memory machines." Researcher Bae Seung-jin brought scientific rigor to their approach. He carefully measured how students responded to different teaching methods. His data showed remarkable results. Children in the Inquiry Learning Center solved problems faster, remembered information longer, and most importantly, enjoyed learning more than traditionally educated students. "Look at these creativity scores," Bae showed Daeho a graph during one of their weekly meetings. "Our students score 3 times higher than Academy-trained children on every measure of original thinking." The breakthrough came when they realized that questions were more powerful than answers. Traditional education focused on giving students correct information. Inquiry method focused on teaching students to ask better questions about that information. "Why do we assume this theory is correct?" became a standard phrase in their classrooms. "What would happen if we tried a completely different approach?" was heard every day. "How can we test this idea to see if it really works?" Turned every lesson into a scientific adventure. Word of their success began spreading beyond the human colony. A few alien families living on New Sol became curious. The first to try their methods was Attila Ray's family, whose daughter had been labeled learning disabled. By Academy standards, Kethan was a young Tillery researcher whose daughter Neela had struggled in traditional schools. Her mind worked in patterns that the academy system could not understand or measure.
Yes.
She asked too many questions and refused to accept simple explanations. She sounds perfect for our program, Dr. Kang told Keithan when he nervously approached them for help. Within weeks, Neela was thriving. Her natural curiosity, which had been treated as a problem in academy schools, became her greatest strength in the Inquiry Learning Center. She asked questions that even the human students had not considered. Her different way of thinking added new perspectives to every discussion. She comes home excited about learning, Keithan told Daeho with tears in his large eyes. The first time in her life, she believes she is smart. More alien families began requesting admission. Each species brought different cognitive patterns and ways of understanding the world, rather than trying to force them all to think the same way. The Inquiry Learning Center celebrated these differences. A young Vexery student named Zoran had excellent memory, but had been failing academy classes because he asked too many irrelevant
questions. In the Inquiry Center, his detailed recall combined with his natural curiosity made him an excellent researcher. Lila, a Cathari girl whose species was known for emotional intelligence, had been told she was too sensitive for serious
academic work. The inquiry method showed her that understanding feelings and relationships was just as important as understanding mathematics and science. We are not just teaching different subjects, Daeho realized during a staff meeting. We are proving that intelligence comes in many forms. The Academy recognizes only one type of smart. We are showing the galaxy that there are thousands of ways to be brilliant. The results spoke for themselves. Students from the Inquiry Learning Center consistently outperformed Academy students on any test that required original thinking or creative problem solving. They struggled only on tests that required memorization without understanding. That tells us everything we need to know about what the galaxy values, Dr. King observed sadly. But change was coming. Parents throughout the colony began requesting the inquiry method for their children. Teachers from other human settlements visited to learn their techniques. Most importantly, alien families began secretly seeking out human educational resources. The revolution was beginning quietly, one curious child at a time. By the end of their first year, Daeho looked at his students with pride. They asked better questions than most academy graduates. They solved problems in ways that surprised even their teachers. They approached learning with joy instead of fear. You know what the best part is? He told Dr. Kong as they watched their students design an experiment to test whether plants could grow in artificial gravity.
What? They still do not know they are doing anything revolutionary.
To them,
This just feels like how school should.
work. Dr. Kang smiled. Maybe that means we are doing it right. 2 years after starting the Inquiry Learning Center, Kim Daeho received an encrypted message that changed everything. The sender identified himself as Dr. Malthan, a Zarian professor from the Outer Rim territories. My species has been classified as learning deficient for over 1,000 years, the message read. But after studying your teaching methods in secret, I believe we simply think differently than the Academy expects. Please help us understand how to teach our children the human way. Daeho stared at the message in shock. Somehow, word of their small experimental school had traveled across the galaxy. Alien educators were seeking out human teaching methods. Even though such contact could cost them their careers, he brought the message to Dr. Kong and the rest of their team. Systems analyst Lim Siono had joined them the previous year, helping to organize their growing educational resources. Communications expert Chen Myra had started documenting their methods so other teachers could learn from their experience. We cannot ignore this, Dr. Kong said firmly. If other species need our help, we have to find a way to provide it. How? Asked teacher Ohayeri. The Academy monitors all educational communications. If they discover we are sharing teaching methods with aliens, they could shut down human colonies entirely. Lim Xianho spoke up quietly. I might have a solution. There are private communication networks that traders use to avoid Academy oversight. If we are careful, we could create a hidden system for sharing educational resources. Over the next months, they built what became known as the Underground Learning Network. Using encrypted channels and coded messages, They connected with educators from dozens of species who had grown frustrated with academy methods. The network started small. A Talari teacher named Vorth, who had been labeled incompetent because his students asked too many questions. A Bethan professor called Yilin, whose research had been rejected for being inappropriately creative. A group of Mokari educators who had been fired for encouraging students to challenge established theories. Each contact brought the same story. Intelligent, capable teachers and students being punished for thinking in ways the Academy did not approve. Species with rich intellectual traditions being told their minds were defective because they did not match galactic standards. This pattern, Chen Myra showed the team a map of their network contacts. Every species that has joined the Academy shows the same decline in innovation over time. But the species on the edges, the ones who have limited contact with Academy education, still show high levels of creativity and original thinking. Dr. Yun Taeon had been tracking these patterns for months. It is not just education, he explained. The Academy system is designed to identify and suppress any type of thinking that does not fit their narrow definition of intelligence. They call it maintaining stability, but they are actually preventing progress. The Underground Learning Network began sharing more than just teaching methods. They exchanged research about different cognitive patterns, learning styles, and ways of understanding the world. What they discovered was revolutionary. Each species had unique strengths that Academy education ignored or actively suppressed. The Xerians had incredible ability to see patterns across vast amounts of data, but Academy methods focused only on memorizing individual facts. The Bethans could understand complex emotional and social relationships, but Academy training taught them to ignore these insights as irrelevant. We are not dealing with learning disabilities, Daeho realized during one of their secret meetings. We are dealing with cognitive diversity. The Academy has convinced the galaxy that there is only one right way to think, but that is completely wrong. The network grew rapidly. Teachers shared lesson plans that worked with their species' natural thought patterns. Students who had been failing in Academy schools began succeeding when taught methods that matched how their minds actually worked. But their success attracted unwanted attention. Supervisor Deltar of the Universal Academy had been tracking disturbing trends in Academy enrollment and performance. Fewer students were applying to Academy schools, or graduates were questioning established theories. Worst of all, some Academy-trained individuals were beginning to think independently instead of following approved thought patterns. His investigation led him to the human colonies. Reports described teaching methods that encouraged students to question authority and develop original ideas. This was exactly the kind of dangerous thinking that the Academy had worked for millennia to eliminate. Issue a galaxy-wide warning, Veltar ordered his staff. Human educational methods cause mental instability and cognitive dysfunction. Any institution or individual found using these techniques will be subject to immediate intervention. The warning had exactly the opposite effect that Veltar intended. Instead of scaring people away from human methods, the official Academy warning made beings throughout the galaxy more curious about what humans were actually teaching. If the Academy was so worried about human education, it must be something powerful. Underground networks that had been operating secretly suddenly found themselves flooded with new requests for information. Students who had never heard of human teaching methods began seeking them out specifically because the Academy had forbidden them. On dozens of worlds, protests began erupting at Academy institutions. Students demanded to know why they were not allowed to learn about alternative educational approaches. Parents questioned why their children were being taught to suppress their natural curiosity. The Makari homeworld saw the largest demonstrations. Thousands of students gathered outside Academy buildings, carrying signs that read, "Let us think for ourselves, and questions are not crimes." Similar protests spread to the Tillery system, the Bethan colonies, and even some core worlds where Academy influence was strongest. What had started as a small experiment on a human colony had become a galaxy-wide movement for educational freedom. They are calling it the Cognitive Liberation Movement, Chen Myra reported to the team during one of their emergency meetings. Our teaching methods have become a symbol of resistance against Academy control. This is getting dangerous. Worried. Dr. Kung, the Academy will not allow this kind of challenge to continue. They will take action against us. She was right to be concerned. Supervisor Veltar was already planning a response that would demonstrate the dangers of human thinking. Once and for all, if beings throughout the galaxy wanted to see whether human education was truly superior to Academy methods, he would give them that opportunity. But first, he would make sure the test was designed so that human methods would fail spectacularly, discrediting the entire movement and restoring Academy authority. Prepare a formal challenge, he ordered his staff. If humans believe their education system is superior to ours, let them prove it in direct competition. We will show the galaxy what happens when proper cognitive discipline faces chaotic human thinking. The announcement of the academic challenge reached Deho through the Underground Learning Network. The Academy was offering to test human educational methods against their own in a public competition. The winning system would be officially recognized as the superior approach to galactic education. It is obviously a trap, Lim Xianho warned. They will structure the competition to favor their methods. Of course they will, Deho agreed. But they are also giving us exactly what we need.
Ow.
What do you mean? A chance to prove to the entire galaxy that there is a better way to learn. Even if they try to rig the test, we have something they do not. Which is, Deho smiled, thinking, of all the students who had learned to question everything, to approach problems from unexpected angles, and to find creative solutions to impossible challenges. We have minds that refuse to accept that anything is impossible. The announcement of the Great Academic Challenge spread across the galaxy faster than light travel. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Universal Academy would face direct competition. News networks covered the story constantly. Betting pools opened on dozens of worlds. Entire species watched and waited to see which educational system would prove superior. Kim Geho stood in the main conference room of the Inquiry Learning Center, surrounded by his team and a collection of the brightest minds the Underground Learning Network had produced. The challenge would take place in 3 months on Nexus Prime, broadcast live to every inhabited world in the galaxy. The rules are exactly what we expected, strategic planner Hong Ji-hoon explained to the group. He had volunteered to help coordinate their response after hearing about the challenge. The first phase will test traditional academic knowledge. The second phase will measure problem-solving abilities using established methods. The third phase... He paused, frowning at his notes. What about the third phase? Asked Dr. Kong. We call it the impossible problem, a theoretical challenge that has stumped Academy scholars for centuries. Both teams will have 4 hours to present their approach to solving it. Educational theorist Shin Yunbi leaned forward. She had joined them recently after years of frustration with conventional teaching methods. It sounds like they designed the first 2 phases to favor their students, then added a third phase they expect no one to solve. Exactly, Deho agreed. They think the Academy team will win the first 2 phases easily, making the third phase irrelevant. What they do not understand is that we are not trying to beat them at their own game. Then what are we trying to do? Asked Chenmira. We are trying to show the galaxy a completely different game. Selecting the team proved more challenging than anyone expected. The Underground Learning Network had produced brilliant students from dozens of species, each trained in inquiry methods that celebrated their natural cognitive strengths. Minho, now 15, had become exceptional at asking the right questions to reveal hidden assumptions in any problem. His sister Yuna specialized in finding connections between seemingly unrelated ideas. Neela, the young Talari, whose learning disability had disappeared under inquiry teaching, could process vast amounts of information and identify patterns that others missed. Zorin, the Vexery student with perfect memory, had learned to combine his recall abilities with creative thinking. Leela, the emotional Cathari girl, had developed insights into social and psychological aspects of problems that purely logical approaches often missed. But the Academy team was formidable, handpicked from the top students of the most prestigious institutions. They represented the absolute best of traditional galactic education. Their leader was Academician Prime Zelthan, whose perfect test scores and flawless adherence to established methods had made him legendary. They have been training for this specific competition for months, Hong Ji-hoon reported after gathering intelligence about the Academy team. Every member knows thousands of approved solutions to standard problems. They have practiced working together until they function like a single mind, Good Daeho said, surprising everyone. That means they will approach every challenge the same way. Predictably. The preparation took place in secret locations throughout the human colonies. Students from different species learned to work together, combining their various cognitive strengths into approaches that no single mind could have developed alone. Remember, Dr. Kang told them during one training session, "You are not trying to prove you are smarter than Academy students. You are trying to prove that intelligence comes in many forms, and diversity of thought is more powerful than uniformity." 3 weeks before the challenge, disaster struck. Supervisor Veltar announced new rules. Each team could have only 5 members instead of the originally planned 10. Worse, the competition would use Academy testing technology to measure cognitive resonance during the challenge. "They are trying to sabotage us," Lim Seon-ho said angrily. "The cognitive resonance technology is designed to detect Academy-approved thought patterns. Our students will be penalized for thinking differently." "No," Daeho said quietly. "They are giving us an advantage." "How is that an advantage?" "Because now the entire galaxy will see exactly how the Academy system works. When our students produce brilliant solutions but score low on cognitive resonance, everyone will understand that the Academy values conformity over creativity." The final team selection was agonizing. From hundreds of exceptional students, they could choose only 5. In the end, Daeho selected representatives from 5 different species, each with complementary strengths. Minho would lead the team, his ability to ask penetrating questions helping guide their approach to each challenge. Neela would serve as their pattern analyst, her Talari mind capable of processing information in ways that other species found impossible. Zoran would be their knowledge repository, his perfect memory providing instant access to any fact they might need. Lila would handle the social and emotional aspects of problems, understanding human and alien psychology in ways that pure logic could not match. The final member was Kale, a young Zarian whose species had been labeled learning deficient by the Academy, but whose mind naturally found creative solutions to impossible challenges. The journey to Nexus Prime felt like traveling to battle. News. Reporters crowded the spaceports asking for predictions and interviews. Betting odds heavily favored the Academy team. Most galactic citizens expected the human experiment to fail spectacularly. "Are you nervous?" Dr. Kong asked Daeho, as their ship approached the planet where his academic journey had begun 3 years earlier. "Terrified," he admitted. "Of losing. I am afraid of what happens if we win." "What do you mean?" "If we prove that human methods are superior, the Academy will never forgive us. They might ban human colonies from the galaxy entirely. And if we lose, then billions of beings will continue to have their creativity crushed in the name of education." Competition Arena was a massive amphitheater that could hold 50,000 spectators. Every seat was filled, with billions more watching through broadcast networks. Representatives from hundreds of species had traveled to witness the event that would determine the future of galactic education. Supervisor Veltar stood at the center of the arena, his voice carrying clearly through the speakers. "Today we will settle the question of proper education once and for all. The Academy team represents 10 millennia of proven educational excellence. The human team represents dangerous experimentation that threatens the stability of galactic civilization." The crowd responded with mixed reactions. Supporters of traditional education cheered for the Academy, but a surprising number of beings applauded for the human team. The underground learning network had grown larger than anyone realized. "Phase 1 will test fundamental knowledge," Veltar announced. "Each team will answer questions about mathematics, science, history, and philosophy. Responses will be evaluated for accuracy and cognitive resonance." The Academy team performed exactly as expected, provided perfect answers to every question, their responses showing complete alignment with approved galactic knowledge. The cognitive resonance readings were flawless. The human team approached the same questions differently. Instead of reciting memorized answers, they discussed the assumptions behind each question. They explored alternative interpretations. They asked whether the questions themselves were properly formed. Their answers were often more complete and insightful than the academy responses, but their cognitive resonance scores were terrible. The monitoring equipment detected dangerous levels of independent thinking and creative interpretation. Phase 1 results, Veltar announced with satisfaction. Academy team, 98.7%. Human team, 23.1%. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Academy supporters celebrated the expected victory. But many observers had noticed something interesting. While the human team's official scores were low, their actual discussions had been more engaging and thought-provoking than the Academy team's mechanical recitations. Phase 2 will test problem-solving abilities, Veltar continued. Each team will receive identical technical challenges and demonstrate approved solution methods. Again, the Academy team excelled at applying standard techniques to familiar problems. Their methods were efficient and precise, following procedures that had been refined over centuries. The human team's approach was chaos by Academy standards. They questioned whether the problems were being solved correctly. They suggested alternative definitions of success. They found solutions that worked better than the approved methods, but violated established procedures. Phase 2 results, Academy team 97.3%. Human team 31.8%. The pattern was clear. By Academy standards, the human team was failing catastrophically. But growing numbers of spectators were beginning to question whether Academy standards were the right way to measure intelligence. Phase 3, Veltar announced, his voice carrying a note of triumph. The impossible problem. For over 8 centuries, the greatest minds in the galaxy have struggled with this theoretical challenge. Neither team is expected to solve it completely, but we will evaluate their approaches and reasoning. The arena fell completely silent as the human team continued their analysis of the impossible problem. For 800 years, the greatest Academy minds had approached this challenge using established mathematical frameworks. Every attempt had failed, but the failures had been properly documented and academically acceptable. What the human team was doing looked like complete chaos too, Academy observers. Minho stood at the center of his teammates, asking rapid questions that seemed to have no logical connection. Why are we trying to distribute energy at all? What if the problem is not about distribution, but about understanding what energy actually is in these dimensions? Neela's large tillery eyes were processing information streams that appeared on their shared display screen. Her mind worked through patterns that other species found impossible to follow. The mathematical constraints create paradoxes only if we assume linear relationships. But look at these correlation patterns. Nothing here is actually linear. Zorian's perfect memory was pulling up thousands of research papers, scientific theories, and mathematical proofs. But instead of using them as definitive answers, he was treating them as starting points for new questions. Every solution attempt in the last 8 centuries has assumed these dimensional layers exist independently. What if that assumption is wrong? Lila was focused on something completely different. Her emotional intelligence was analyzing the problem from a perspective that pure logic could never reach. This feels like a social problem disguised as a mathematical one. What if these energy patterns represent relationships between conscious beings rather than physical forces? Kale, the young Zarian, was combining all of their insights in ways that surprised even his teammates. His species' natural creativity was finding connections that Academy training would have labeled impossible. What if we stop trying to solve this problem and start trying to understand why it was created? In the Academy section, Supervisor Veltar watched with growing alarm. The cognitive resonance monitors were showing readings he had never seen before. The human team was not just thinking outside approved parameters, they were thinking in ways that the monitoring systems could not even measure. Their cognitive patterns are completely chaotic, he whispered to his assistant. No coordinated species should be able to function with such mental disorder. But the human team was not functioning like a coordinated species. They were functioning like 5 different species working together, each contributing cognitive abilities that the others lacked. Their diversity of thought was creating insights that no single type of mind could have achieved. I think I understand, Minho said suddenly, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's speakers. This is not an energy distribution problem. It is a communication problem. The crowd stirred. Communication problem. That made no sense in the context of mathematical physics. Explain, encouraged Dr. Kong from the observation deck, though she was not sure Minho could hear her. Look at the dimensional layers, Minho continued, pointing to the display screen. They are not separate physical spaces. They are different ways of perceiving the same space. The energy that seems to need distribution is actually information trying to flow between different types of consciousness. Neela's pattern recognition suddenly aligned with Minho's insight. Yes, the mathematical constraints are not physical. Limitations. They are translation barriers. Different types of minds trying to communicate but using incompatible thought structures. The Academy team had stopped their own work and was listening in confusion. This interpretation had nothing to do with established theoretical physics. It was complete nonsense by Academy standards, but Zoran was already finding supporting evidence in the scientific literature. There are papers from before Academy standardization that explored consciousness-based energy models. The research was abandoned because it could not be reduced to approved mathematical methods. The solution is not to distribute energy between the dimensional layers, Lila realized. The solution is to create a translation system that allows different types of consciousness to communicate effectively across dimensional barriers. Kale began working frantically on their shared display, combining mathematical models with insights from xenopsychology, communication theory, and even artistic expression. If consciousness creates dimensional barriers, then bridging those barriers requires understanding how different minds actually work. What they created in the final hour was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Not a mathematical proof or a technical solution, but a comprehensive framework for interdimensional consciousness communication. It addressed the original problem by completely redefining what the problem actually was. Time Supervisor Veltar announced, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The Academy team presented their work first. They had applied 17 different established mathematical approaches to the problem. Each attempt had failed, in predictable ways, but their methodology was flawless. Their cognitive resonance scores remained perfect throughout their presentation. We were unable to solve the stated problem, admitted academician Prime Zelthan. However, we have thoroughly documented why the problem cannot be solved using approved methods. This represents significant advancement in our understanding of theoretical limitations. The crowd responded politely. The Academy team had done exactly what was expected. They had failed properly, following all correct procedures and maintaining appropriate thought patterns throughout. Then the human team presented their work. We believe the problem has been unsolvable because it was based on incorrect assumptions, Minho began. Instead of trying to distribute energy between dimensional layers, we focused on understanding why such distribution seemed necessary. Their presentation was unlike anything the Academy had ever encountered. Instead of mathematical proofs, they offered psychological insights. Instead of technical solutions, they provided communication frameworks. Instead of following established procedures, they created entirely new ways of thinking about the problem. The energy distribution issue resolves itself once you establish proper communication. Protocols between different dimensional consciousness types, Neela explained. Her patterns analysis showing clear pathways through what had seemed like impossible mathematical constraints. More importantly, Kale added, this framework can be applied to thousands of other impossible problems that assume physical solutions to consciousness-based challenges. The crowd was stunned. The human team had not just solved the 800-year-old problem. They had revealed that it was not actually the problem that needed solving. Supervisor Veltar stood frozen at the center of the arena. The cognitive resonance monitors showed impossible readings for the human team. By Academy standards, their thinking patterns were completely chaotic and dysfunctional. But their solution worked. Mathematical models were already confirming that. Their consciousness communication framework resolved the theoretical paradoxes that had puzzled scholars for centuries. For the first time in Academy history, Cognitive resonance scores and actual results were pointing in opposite directions. "This is impossible," Veltar whispered. "Beings cannot function with such cognitive disorder." The resonance readings indicate complete mental chaos. But Dr. Kang had been watching something different during the competition. While the Academy team had worked like a single coordinated mind, the human team had functioned like 5 completely different types of intelligence working together. Their cognitive chaos was actually cognitive diversity. "Maybe," she said loud enough for the arena's microphones to catch, "the problem is not with their minds. Maybe the problem is with your measurement system." The implications hit the crowd like a wave. If the cognitive resonance technology was designed to measure conformity rather than intelligence, then low scores might actually indicate superior thinking abilities. The Academy had been using a system that punished exactly the kind of mental abilities needed to solve truly difficult problems. Supervisor Veltar faced an impossible choice. He could declare the Academy team the winner based on cognitive resonance scores. The entire galaxy had watched the human team solve a problem that Academy methods could not even approach. Or he could acknowledge that Academy measurement systems were fundamentally flawed. Undermining 10 millennia of educational authority, the silence stretched for long minutes as Veltar struggled with the decision that would determine the future of galactic civilization. Finally, he spoke. "The results of this competition require careful analysis before any conclusions can be drawn. The Academy will issue its official findings after thorough review." It was exactly the response that Kim Dae-ho had expected. The Academy could not admit failure, but they could no longer claim clear victory. But the galaxy had already drawn its own conclusions. Within hours of the competition's end, applications poured in from hundreds of worlds requesting information about human educational methods. The underground learning network found itself overwhelmed with messages from teachers, students, and entire species wanting to learn about inquiry-based education. 3 months later, Dae-ho stood before the first graduating class of the Galactic University of Inquiry. The new institution had been established on New Sol, with funding from dozens of species who had grown tired of Academy limitations. "Represents something that has not existed in this galaxy for thousands of years," he told the diverse crowd of graduates. "Minds that have been trained to question everything, to think creatively, and to approach problems from perspectives that others might never consider." Among the graduates were beings from 37 different species, each trained in methods that celebrated their natural cognitive strengths rather than suppressing them. They would return to their worlds not as conforming products of established education, but as agents of intellectual revolution. Dr. Kong joined Dae-ho on the platform, looking out at the crowd with satisfaction. "Do you think we won?" she asked quietly. "We did not win," Dae-ho replied, thinking of his impossible test score 3 years earlier. "We changed the game entirely." In the audience, former Academy students sat next to Underground Learning Network graduates. Minho and his teammates had become symbols of what education could accomplish when it focused on developing rather than suppressing. Natural intelligence, the Universal Academy still existed, still trained students in traditional methods, and still claimed authority over galactic education. But it no longer had a monopoly on defining what intelligence meant or how minds should work across the galaxy. Children who would have been labeled learning disabled under Academy standards were discovering that their minds worked perfectly. Well, when taught in ways that matched their natural thinking patterns, species that had been considered intellectually inferior were proving their capabilities when given educational methods that did not require them to think like other species. Most importantly, problems that had been unsolvable for centuries were beginning to yield to approaches that combined different types of intelligence rather than demanding uniformity of thought. Kim Dae-ho had failed the Academy admission test because he thought like a human. Now, beings throughout the galaxy were learning that thinking like themselves might be the most valuable education of all. The revolution was no longer underground. It was everywhere, one curious mind at a time.